So for the past 2 weeks or so, we've been talking about the verses concerning divorce from Surah Al-Baqarah. And what's interesting is there's many verses in this surah which talk about divorce. Talks about all the details from the iddah to the mahar and what happens and all of that. And then right in the middle of all these verses, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in verse 238, حافظوا على الصلوات والصلاة الوسطى. Guard your prayers and especially guard the middle prayer. وَقُومُوا لِلَّهِ قَانِتِينَ. And stand up in front of Allah with full devotion. So it's so interesting. There's two verses. There's another one right after this. Two verses about prayer and the importance of prayer and the importance of protecting your prayer and guarding your prayer and making sure to pray on time have been inserted right in the middle of all the verses about divorce. Now let's just look at the verse real quick for a moment. Allah is saying, protect your prayers. Protecting your prayers means two things. Number one, it means praying on time. And number two, it means praying with as much concentration as you possibly can. And then Allah mentions, وَالصَّلَاةِ الْوُسْطَى. According to most scholars, the middle prayer is the Asr prayer. According to some scholars, they said it's the Fajr prayer because the day starts after sunset. So Maghrib and then Isha, the third one will be Fajr. So today people will think Fajr is the hardest for them generally. But Asr prayer used to be difficult for people because they're involved in trade and business and transactions, and you get busy at work, and then all of a sudden you look at the time, and you're like, what happened? Totally missed the Asr prayer. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying, be especially careful for the prayers that you're likely going to miss, or that you likely get distracted and you're not focusing on. And when you stand up for prayer, make sure you do it fully. So now the last thing, without going into this, we've covered this a few months ago, the same verse at Fajr time. Why, the scholars explain, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala insert two verses of prayer in the middle of over a dozen verses about talaq, about divorce? They say the connection is clear. Because in the middle, the core and the strength of a marital relationship, the core and the strength of the family is going to be through the strength of your prayer. And this is extremely important. And one person, he gave a long time ago, I remember I heard a lecture from one of the brothers in Corona. He was giving a lecture about marriage. And he said that marriage is a three-dimensional relationship. It's not just between you and the other person, but when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is there, now you're not just doing things for the other person. You're doing things for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Somebody upsets you. Somebody says something that makes you, bothersome, your spouse or something like that. You say, you know what? I'm not only treating you this way or forgiving you or overlooking this for you, but I'm doing this for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And recently somebody showed me a little picture, those little infographics or whatever. They said, if you think about it, if you look at it as a triangle, say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the husband and the wife. And you say, you know what? The closer each of them gets to Allah, the triangle gets shortened and they get closer to each other. So the closer you get to Allah, the closer you get to each other as well. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us to protect our prayers. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala help us to protect our families by getting closer to Allah. Ameen. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Assalamu alaikum.